All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here, we're doing our 2023 Big 12 Championship game preview and prediction. Mike Gundy's resilient Pokes going up against the Longhorns, who are playoff hopefuls. 11.5-point line in favor of Texas. Totals 53.5. Noon Eastern Time on ABC, Arlington, Texas, the site of this one. Look at this Oklahoma State offense. It's a bit of an interesting effort to get them here. Coming into this season, Nick, I felt that Oklahoma State, they would win, at least 7 games. They would be above 500 because Gundy's always above 500, even though I didn't think that they had the roster to really accomplish that. And this year, they finally started using some of these guys properly. Ollie Gordon, 20 touchdowns, 1,580 yards rushing. He's a bit of a workhorse here, coming off a 5-touchdown effort. This guy's incredibly elusive, has some good speed on the edge. On the interior, though, he's great at getting off blocks, great ball security as well. Just a phenomenal runner overall who does a great job of breaking tackles. That's about it. Nobody else really sees the ball much. Jaden Nixon, only 50 carries on the year. $131 rushing per game is what you're getting from Gordon. He's highly productive for this rushing attack, Nick, going against one of the nation's best run defenses. What do you think the game plan is going to be here? Because this guy certainly made his impact felt as a pass catcher as well, with 33 grabs for 272. He's got to be a focal point regardless of the matchup, though.
Ollie Gordon is certainly going to be the guy that gets the carries in this game. He had an incredible performance against BYU in overtime, double overtime, to send Oklahoma State to the final edition of the Big 12 title game as we know it and send them off with a bang. 34 carries, 166 yards, 5 touchdowns against BYU. Just incredible numbers from Ollie Gordon. He is just a true star in the making in college football, having a truly incredible season. 1,500 yards, nearly 1,600 yards, 6.4 yards per carry, the 20 touchdowns, and the a receiving touchdown as well, 272 yards and 8.2 yards per grab. Passing, Jaden Nixon is also there as well. Doesn't really get that many touches, but he is a nice complimentary back when they do use him. The Pokes are going to have to run the ball. This is what's going to be the way they get the job done. 5 yards per carry. They're right at that sweet spot on the ground. Pretty solid number. 27 rushing touchdowns total. 30.2 points per game. They're going to have to score a lot of points to beat this Texas offense that is a very solid unit as well. The Pokes have looked good the last couple weeks on offense, other than that game where they got absolutely trounced at UCF 45-3. I don't know what happened there, but they scored 40 against BYU, 43 against Houston, 27 against Oklahoma, and 45 against Cincinnati. Good numbers from Mike Gundy's offense, and it's been really much relying on the run back and forth, just running the ball, pounding the rock.
Games they really struggled in the first half, too, against Houston and BYU, having to overcome some lofty comebacks there. If they want to win this game, though, Alan Bowman, veteran quarterback's going to have a great day. Problem is, 11 interceptions compared to 10 touchdowns. I don't think that tells the full story because he does have 2,800 yards. He didn't get the nod until, a couple games into the season, and he had a great effort against Oklahoma. This is a guy that, showcased in the air raid for Texas Tech many years back, how impressive he can be. But 6 interceptions over the last 3 games, 3 of them in that game against UCF, had one against Houston, had a bad pick 6 against BYU. Looked like a bit of a miscommunication, at least you would hope. This is a guy that can certainly air it out, Nick, and he has great weapons to get it done. I think Brandon Presley's a great slot weapon. Rashad Owens on the boundary. This is a guy they like to feed as well. He had 10 receptions against Oklahoma. Presley himself had, I think it was 15 in that game against Houston. Leon Johnson, he's been a real good player, 6'5", 215 on the outside. He had 132 against BYU, $150 against Cincinnati. He had a big day against Oklahoma as well. These are some nice pass catchers here. Even Jaden Bray's a highly talented playmaker. DeJon Stribling, of course, his injury at the beginning of the year was not great for them, but all 4 of those guys just read off, Nick. They've been phenomenal as pass catchers, and of course, Ollie Gordon, they like to get him the rock as much as possible. What do you anticipate from Bowman here? I think this is the right guy to get the job done, but he cannot, continue to make mistakes. Completing 60% of his passes, needs to be a little bit higher than that, at least 65 or above, I think, to give this offense an opportunity.
I think Bowman is the right guy here, but he faced a tough test in a very solid Texas defense that has looked good at points this season. Bowman, 60% completion percentage, not really fantastic. 2,800 yards is a really good number. 10 touchdowns, 11 picks is poor. He highlighted all the interceptions, not going to rehash over it. Bowman, I think, is a solid quarterback, a good decision maker at times. Yes, he struggles to make decisions in certain situations, but overall, very talented player. Brandon Presley, your top wide receiver, 746 and 5 touchdowns, 9.8 yards per grab. Rashad Owens, 646, 13.2 and 1 touchdown for him. Leon Johnson, 446, 16.5 and a touchdown. Jaden Bray as well, 383, 13 and 2 touchdowns for him. Ollie Gordon involved in the passing game as well. This is a deep wide receiving room that has some talented players. They do like to spread it out. I like the balance they have on offense here.
Yeah, this offensive line, it's been really good this season in terms of pass protection, led by right guard Preston Wilson. He's been one of the nation's best at his position. I think the tackle spots are pretty well with Jake Springfield. And then, of course, on the other side, Dalton Cooper. Some really good linemen here for, the Pokes at center. Joe McCalskey's been really good. I mean, these guys aren't the most polished of run blockers, but Gordon, the initial point of attack, they're pretty sound. And then Gordon, of course, he does a lot on his own. Cole Birmingham at left guard is probably the biggest liability for him. I think overall this is a very sound offensive line. Nick, they're going against, again, one of the nation's best defensive fronts, and I expect them to have a good day overall. But the slow starts for this team and these second half comebacks, that might be a good omen for them, because Texas in the second half of games this year hasn't looked all that great. But I just don't want to see them slow start one bit, and I think it'd be a tragedy if they did once again, because I think they have enough talent to hang in here. But if Bowman makes silly mistakes and they do start slow in the first 30 minutes, that's just going to be really tough to come back from that in this game.
A slow start could certainly be a problem for this team. They have had slow starts throughout the season. This offensive line is a big physical unit. They're pretty solid in pass block and really good in run block, obviously, considering Ollie Gordon's success. They're going to be good against this Texas front seven that's been very dominant. We've seen them get in the backfield and cause headaches for teams like Oklahoma, Alabama, and other teams that Texas has played this season.
Looking at the Texas offense, 35 points per game, led by Quinn Ewers, 2,700 yards, 17 touchdowns, 5 picks. He certainly is having a great year, 70% completion rate, and he's obviously showed a lot of maturity all season long. The consistency factor certainly hasn't been all that great, especially in some of those games like the TCU and Iowa State contest, where they just weren't able to really, punch it in as much as you'd think. They've really struggled in the red zone this year. And they've certainly had some of their own slow starts. This team isn't really scoring points like they should be. A 57 against Texas Tech, they finally exploded and played a full game. That 50-point victory held less than 30 points, and you're looking at like 6 straight contests. They put up 40 against Kansas, a game they also were able to hit some big plays down the field. But for the most part this year, Nick, they had 57, but only a couple times this year have they hit 40-plus points, and that's only 2 times. That's really disappointing, I think, for what they have, because they have a lot of explosiveness in Xavier Worthy, 83 and 5 touchdowns, 9 scores for AD Mitchell. Jatavian Sanders is great down the seam. Jordan Whittington's a nice slot option as well. And obviously, Jonathan Brooks, his injury isn't great for this offense. A lot of physicality there, an explosive runner. I think they're going to be just fine at the running back position. What do you make of this passing game, though, and the inability to sustain this consistency when it comes to sparking big plays and even scoring points?
It's been odd, the inability to sustain consistency. 34.9 points per game is not a number you really would hope if you're a Texas fan. 20 passing touchdowns to 8 interceptions so far this season. The total offense, 6.5 yards per play. Rushing, they look a little bit better, 4.92. The passing just really hasn't been fantastic at times. Quinn Ewers, though, has been a really good quarterback. He's stepped in and been that guy. Obviously, injury concerns here and there, but outside the injury concerns, he's been phenomenal. Nearly 70% completion percentage, 2,700 yards, 17 scores, and 5 picks for him. This quarterback room is very deep. Malik Murphy, he looked okay at times when he came in relief. Obviously, Quinn Ewers is the guy taking the reins. Arch Manning did get his first appearance this past week against Texas Tech. To a round of applause from the Texas faithful. Xavier Worthy, obviously, is your top wide receiver, very talented player, 883 for him, 13.2 yards per grab, 5 scores. You wanted to see that average a little bit higher for Worthy. And Denali Mitchell, fantastic season as well, 704 yards receiving, 15.69 scores. Tavion Sanders, 1 touchdown, 502. Jordan Whittington, 387, and 1 score. Jonathan Brooks, 286, and 1 score as well for him. They can spread it out. They do have some nice depth, but the passing has been a little concerning. The passer rating's 150.97. You thought that would be a little bit higher considering the ceiling that Ewers has. I don't think he's met his ceiling yet. He's still fully developing as a pocket passer.
Yeah, Texas, 130th. With a 44% touchdown conversion rate in the red zone. The team below them, Iowa, not great company to be in, even though Iowa certainly has had less opportunities. Yeah, Brooks, when he tore his ACL against TCU, 1,139 yards on the ground and 10 touchdowns is what you were giving up. But I wasn't all that worried. CJ Baxter, he's up to 552 with 3 scores. Jaden Blue, he had a long run of his own. Keelan Robinson as well, only a couple of touches. But I got guys they can give the ball to. Savion Red, a guy that like to get involved at 5'10", 214. So they got certainly, some physicality they can use in short yardage and guys that can start, spark big plays. 302 yards against Texas Tech. Before that, though, they kind of struggled. The TCU game wasn't all that great. Didn't really have much against Iowa State. I think Kansas State, they were running the ball very well in that game. They slowed down in the second half. Kansas, they flat out demolished them. Oklahoma was a tough effort. So I think the rushing offense certainly also hasn't had the greatest of consistency, almost 5 yards per carry. The physicality in Brooks is gone. Is that a concern for you?
I think it is a little bit of concern. Brooks is such a talented runner. Losing him for the season was disappointing. 1,100 yards on the ground, 10 scores, 6.1 yards per carry. They do have a nice duo in Baxter and Blue. That step up Blue. He has a big opportunity to step up, be that number 2 back. Baxter, 552, 4.8, and 3 scores when he was the true number 2 back. Now he's the number 1 back. Solid guy, good in receptions as well with 18 grabs for him. Solid guy out of the backfield, not a bad. Obviously Brooks. I highlighted him in the receiving. He is out for the season. That is a mistake on my end, but he was good in the receiving, so you do lose that dual threat ability. Jaden Blue, Savion Red are 2 guys that now have to step up. Red will be that number 3 back, could be involved as well. Blue can be involved out of the backfield. He has 7 receptions this season, 306 and 6.7 yards per carry. 2 scores for Blue. Red, 112, 4.5, and 1 score. That is a nice balance. I think it is a good unit they have there. 4.92 yards per attempt on the ground, solid number, not that far off that 5 yard per carry sweet spot where you want to be. So I'm not very concerned losing Brooks, but it's definitely demoralizing for this Texas offense.
Strong left side up front, led by Kelvin Banks and Hayden Connor. At center, they have a veteran in Jake Major as well. Very good in pass protection. DJ Campbell, probably a bit of the weakest link there at right guard. A very young, promising player who certainly had some struggles overall, been sound this season. And then Christian Jones, I think, is also quietly having an impressive year. The senior there at right tackle. Really good offensive line, some great size, like their athleticism. This is certainly one of the units compete with anybody in the country. Looking at the Oklahoma State defense, 27.3 points per game allowed. This is a unit that certainly has stepped up when it matters most, but giving up 446 yards per game in conference play. Kind of starts with the run defense. They've certainly had plenty of issues this year. Got demolished by UCF. Exactly 130 allowed in each of the last 2 games, so they're certainly standing a little bit taller. They had a 4-game stretch where they're giving up over 5 yards per carry. They played against Oklahoma, a team that really doesn't have much of an explosive rushing attack, and they gave up some big plays there. Cincinnati, they beat them pretty badly on the scoreboard. They still gave up almost 300 yards rushing. The West Virginia game, they were able to tighten up there too. They certainly have had issues this year. 1, 2, 3, 4 games of 200-plus rushing allowed this year. That's not great. Now you face this rushing attack that has a good offensive line, plenty of guys that have that versatility. No, they're not Jonathan Brooks, but I think they're, again, going to be just fine there. They got to find ways to stand tall here. They have some players like Anthony Goodlow at defensive end, a great linebacking core led by Nicholas Martin, Colin Oliver, and a more of a stand-up role this year, and Xavier Benson, who can be playmakers, and they generate a lot of negative plays, those 4 players. That's what we're going to have to do here. I don't think they need to sell out, at least at this moment in time, to slow down the run, but they certainly have to be able to generate negative plays early and often.
They're going to have to generate negative plays early and often. That is a big opportunity for this unit that can get the job done. Given the opportunities they have, there are some solid pieces for this Nicholas Martin. 120 total tackles, 16 tackles for loss, 6 sacks, and a pick. A kind of do-it-all guy, Martin, a very talented player. They have a really solid piece at your middle linebacker, a good physical middle linebacker. Colin Oliver, 68 total tackles, 14.5 tackles for loss, 6 sacks, 5 pass breakups. Xavier Benson, 56 total tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks. Anthony Goodlow, 36, 6, and 2 for him. Colin Clay, another guy that they really need to see a little bit more out of, 11 total tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks on the season. 27.3 points per game is what opponents are averaging. That is really too high of a number if you're an Oklahoma State fan. 4.62 yards per attempt given up on the ground is a bad omen coming against this very talented Texas rushing attack, even without Brooks. That is certainly difficult to swallow if you're an Oklahoma State fan. 6.28 yards per play of total offense. A number that's a little too high for this front 7. They are a physical unit, though. They do get in the backfield. They have multiple guys with 6 sacks, so that is promising. If Ewers is uncomfortable, that could certainly work in the Cowboys' favor.
Colin Clay, 310-pound nose tackle. Again, I think the middle of the defense certainly is going to be their best chance to win this game with their ability to be productive and make plays. The secondary, though, they're certainly not as great. They've got a handful of guys, though. They've played a lot of snaps this year. I think it's equally as big of a liability as the run defense. Trey Rucker, Kendall Daniels, though, these safeties have been versatile all year long. They've lined up all over the place. I think they can certainly look to try and, roll out some different coverages there to try and confuse Ewers and his receivers. Corey Black's been really good at corner. DJ McKinney, though, not as great. Cam Smith, whoever they've been really well out there at corner outside of Black hasn't been great. Epps at safety as well. I think he's having a good year. He's made some nice plays all season long, that being the freshman Cameron Epps. The secondary, though, they've certainly had plenty of issues. This isn't the same defense they had a couple years ago, which we all figured would happen. They gave 400-plus passing in a win against Kansas. Against Oklahoma, they really had their hands tied in that one. UCF, they almost had 600 yards of offense of how good they were in that one. They stepped up against, a third-string quarterback of BYU. Houston, they were able to beat them by a couple of points, limiting the pass in the second half. But overall, Nick, I mean, they're just going to have to play with a lot of energy in this one and try to create turnovers, because I think it's going to be a long day for this side of the ball if those linebackers aren't being able to provide what we usually see.
I think it will be a long day if these linebackers not able to provide for this team. The secondary does have some nice pieces. They have that nice rover there in Kendall Daniels, 90 total tackles, 4.5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks for him. Trey Rucker, 87 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss. Good numbers. Cameron Eaves, another guy who's a solid player at free safety, a good player with 35 total tackles, 3 picks, 4 pass breakups. DJ McKinney, 29 total tackles, 4 pass breaks for him. Corey Black, 16 tackles, 1 tackle for loss, and 5 pass breakups. The secondary, like I said, has struggled at times. They've gotten beat down the field. 23 touchdowns to 11 picks ratio is not great. They're not really fantastic at getting interceptions. And Texas is a good quarterback that can pick you apart if you give him the time to do so. That's got to be concerning if you're an Oklahoma State fan.
Looking at the Longhorns defense, last year I spent most of it saying that this is a legit run defense. I thought they were great all year long, and they'd probably be even better this year, and they certainly have. I mean, they're down to 85 yards per game allowed, 2.9 yards per average. I mean, they've not cracked one bit. They gave up 201 to Oklahoma and then 155 to Wyoming. That's the only time this year they've really eclipsed 100 yards. 110 against Tech, 107 for Bama. That's it, Nick. I mean, these are staggering numbers, and it's led by the personnel. 2 strong defensive tackles, probably the best duo in America, T'Vondre Sweat and Byron Murphy. This is just a complete wrecking crew. They still have Alfred Collins as well. Barron Sorrell coming off the edge. Another guy in the interior, and Vernon Broughton. I think Ethan Burke has been a terrific player for them this year, stepping up at the edge position. You obviously saw against Alabama. He had made a major impact in that one. This is just a great physical defensive front, an SEC-style defensive line. The production, I think, checks out as well. They have a lot of depth here, and they've really established this over the last couple of years. What do you make of this defensive front? Again, they're going against a great challenge in Ollie Gordon, an offensive line that's been pretty sound this year, at least when it comes to pass blocking and certainly clearing some lanes for Gordon on the interior. It's going to be a fun matchup to watch. One they seem to win handily.
This is a very solid unit that's going up against this front offensive line for Oklahoma State. There are some incredibly talented players defensive line. Like you said, the run totals are quite fantastic for this defense. I mean, the numbers are just incredible. 2.93 yards per attempt given up on the ground is just an impressive number. They are really physical. They get after the quarterback. The sack numbers are solid as well. T'Vondre Sweat, 40 total tackles, 8 tackles for loss, 2 sacks for him. Ethan Burke, 34 total tackles, 8.5 tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks for him. Really good against Alabama. Byron Murphy, 24 total tackles, 8 tackles for loss, 5 sacks for him. Alfred Collins, 18 total tackles, 2 each for him, and a sack and sacks and tackles for loss. Very physical front defensive line unit here, 17.3 points per game given up for this Texas defense. A very physical front line, and they're really getting dominant so far this season. They've looked good all season.
The middle of the defense led by Jalen Ford, a player that really was great alongside DeMarvion Overshown for a couple of seasons, and now he's really taken sole control as the veteran leader next to a true freshman in Anthony Hill. His aggression certainly has caused him to make bad plays in terms of penalties, missed opportunities. Still has 4 sacks and 6.5 tackles for a loss. This is a good player for them. He really makes his presence felt as a rusher as well with that physicality. The rest of the linebacking core, David Gabenda, not as great. But these two in the middle, they've been phenomenal all year for Texas. Not as polished with Hill. But Jalen Ford is an avid leader for them, Nick. What are your thoughts on the middle of this defense? Is certainly big in helping control the run. But when he's got those big guys in front of him, certainly it made it a lot easier. I think the versatility of Ford is certainly on display. A little inconsistent in coverage, but his ability to be a run defender and a nice sound tackler is certainly emphasizes on this defense. I do believe he leads them in missed tackles, but he does play a lot of snaps. Overall, though, what do you think about this middle of the defense?
This is a very interesting middle of the defense. You have 2 guys here that are very talented. Ford, a senior, Anthony Hill Jr., a freshman, right? That's a very interesting comparison there. Ford, 88 total tackles, leading the team, 10.5 tackles for loss, the sack, 2 picks, 2 pass breakups. Anthony Hill Jr., been great as a freshman, 57 total tackles, 6.5 tackles for loss, 4 sacks, 2 pass breakups. The 2 of them together are great against the run. I think the missed tackles number is a bit unfair against a guy like Ford because, like you said, he is playing the most snaps on the defense, so obviously volume is going to be there. Overall, this middle of the defense is fantastic. These are 2 great leaders, 2 good tacklers, and if I'm heading into SEC play in the future, I want to have 2 physical tacklers like Ford and Hill in the middle of my defense.
Now looking at that secondary, they've certainly been vulnerable this year. Houston really tore them up, almost had 400 in that one. Kansas State found a lot of big plays in that second half. They ended up having 4 touchdowns, 300 plus each for TCU and Iowa State on the road. Really in the second half, both of those passing attacks took over. Both had 24 completions each. They completely stonewalled Texas Tech, though, held them to 88 yards on 19 completions. That's an air raid Zach Kitley offense. That's highly impressive. Had 3 picks as well. 15 as a team, Nick. There's a lot of ball hawks back here. 2,800 yards on the season allowed, though, and Oklahoma had a little bit of success themselves. Over the last month of the season, the secondary hasn't been as great. And obviously, they had that big day against the Red Raiders, but this is another test with some good weapons. A veteran quarterback who himself has made a lot of mistakes, so it seems like they're certainly going to have a leg up in terms of being able to snag some away from him. You look at Jaron Thompson. He's been probably the best player for them. He certainly is not very good at stopping the run or being a tackler. He's been great in coverage, though, for them all season long. Gavin Holmes, he got hurt, and Malik Muhammad stepped up against Tech, and he had a massive day. Jedi Barron, his versatility's still been on display. Hasn't been as productive as a season ago. This is still an avid playmaker for them. Ryan Watts, we'll see what his availability is like in this one. The secondary certainly hasn't grown like I thought it would. Terrence Brooks hasn't been that great despite playing more snaps than anyone as an outside corner. So I think they might have some struggles here on the outside against some tough pass catchers. But again, they're ball hawks against a turnover-prone quarterback, Nick. They got 15 of them on the year, led by Brooks, Michael Tafai, and Thompson, who have 3 each. What are your expectations for the back end here? Do you think they're going to crack or crumble?
I think they have an opportunity to be solid. They certainly could be a good unit and this is a nice matchup. They are some struggling at times. The tackling numbers are not fantastic. They are solid in coverage. Brooks, 15 total tackles. Not a number you want to see out of Brooks, but the 3 picks, 6 pass breakups, good numbers for him. Jet Bush, 16 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, a pick for him. Jaron Thompson, 32 total tackles, 3 pass breakups, 3 interceptions, 5 pass breakups. Michael Tarif, 38 total tackles, 3 pass breakups for him. Good numbers. Jahad Barron, 53 total tackles, 4.5 tackles for loss, pick, and 4 pass breakups. Some other good players of note: Ryan Watts, if he's healthy, 32 total tackles, 3 pass breaks. Malik Muhammad, 24 total tackles and 3 pass breakups plus a pick for him. Like you said, they're a ball hawking unit. They're very solid, but they're playing against a sometimes talented and a deep unit at wide receiver, and a quarterback. If Bowman's dialed in, he can pick you apart and really find his accurate opponents. If they can make Bowman pay and get those picks up like the 11 picks he has in the season, this could be very quickly for Oklahoma State. But if he's comfortable in the pocket and they're not getting pressure on him, Bowman could have all day to make things happen.
Yeah, a guy in Jalen Gilbew, who's had to play a little bit more over the last couple of weeks. He's kind of a liability, I think, as well in the slot position. So moving to tail of the tape, the team comparisons at quarterback, clear edge, and Quinn Ewers. Running back, I think Texas is still deep, but Golly Gordon, he's going to win the Doak Walker Award. At wide receiver, I think, again, the Pokes have some nice weapons, but I don't think they're as deep. I don't think they have the same speed from Presley that Worthy possesses. His overall playmaking, offensive line, they've been really good in pass protection, that being Oklahoma State. I think overall as a complete unit, though, Texas certainly fits the bill. I like their defensive line as well. I think it's one of the top 3 in the country. A linebacker, I know Ford is great. Hill's going to get there as well. But I think the production right now of that trio they have, too much to try and, overrule if, you're trying to give that edge to the Horns. And then in the secondary, I think Oklahoma State, they've been getting off a lot of big plays this year, a lot of yards. The Horns, we kind of talked about some of their struggles here. But again, it's still a talented unit that forces a lot of turnovers.
This is certainly a talented unit that forces a lot of turnovers. The secondary unit's solid. I like this tail tape comparison. I think running back does go to Oklahoma State. I think defensive back goes to Texas. Like I said, they force turnovers. Linebacking, Oklahoma State. That could be a little bit closer. I think you potentially give that to Texas. The rest of it feels pretty right for me. Texas is just a better team on paper here, but anything can happen when you meet up in these neutral site, huge conference title games with a lot on the line.
Looking at the final thoughts and the prediction. For Oklahoma State, the wide receivers have to win on the outside, and those backers are going to need to spark some negative plays. For Texas, slow down the run like you're accustomed to. Do not crumble in the moment and play a full game like you did versus Texas Tech. I think we're going to see a little bit of both. I think Oklahoma State will have some success. Ollie Gordon, it's going to be hard to get him going, but I think they're certainly going to find ways to get him the football. This is more of an old school type of offense under Gundy as well, with their ability to kind of stretch the field with their pass catchers, with the times accurate and deep balls that Bowman can uncork. Really not sure what to expect, Nick, because Texas has played a lot of close games over the last month. They haven't really been all that impressive before that game against the Red Raiders where they won by 50. So I'm going to go ahead and take the Pokes to cover 33-23. This game always seems to be a complete crapshoot. Seems to be all over the place. Texas, in moments like this, they typically don't succeed. I think they'll win the game, but I think some style points are certainly going to be evident. But I think they'll get the job done. They'll be sit and wait, see what happens in Atlanta. But I'm going ahead and take Oklahoma State to cover. Gundy's teams of the last couple of weeks, they haven't been all that great at starting, but finishing has been great. In Texas, their problem has been finishing as well. So kind of all over the place on this one, but I'll go ahead and take a 10-point deficit.
I'm kind of all over the place on this one as well. I'm going to take a 10-point deficit. Like you said, I got just a bit of a different score. I think 30-20 is going to be my score. Oklahoma State has certainly a great opportunity to be involved in this game. They were in the Big 12 title game in 21 2 years ago. They lost to Baylor. They were fighting for a playoff spot at that point, and they lost to Baylor, a tough loss for them. I don't think they forgot that. Gundy would love to win the final Big 12 title game in the Big 12 era as we know it. This would be a huge win. They carried that emotion when they beat Oklahoma in the final Bedlam. This is an opportunity for them to beat Texas one last time and get that final going out party for Gundy and company. He's been there forever. He would love to win one more Big 12 title before they hang up the boots of this conference as we know it, with Texas Oklahoma leaving. This should be a fun game in Arlington. It's going to be a crazy crowd, obviously. Probably a pro-Texas crowd if I had to take a guess. They travel pretty well within their own state. It's going to be a close game. Texas, if they win, it may not be enough to get them in. Like you said, they're going to sit and wait and figure out what happens in Atlanta. If Alabama does win in Atlanta, that could set up a nightmare scenario for Texas Longhorn fans. So if you're a Texas fan, you want to win by as much as you can against Oklahoma State. Get as much style points with the committee. We'll see what happens, though. I expect a close game, which could hurt them a little bit here. If they win, they're going to just have to sit there and pray that something positive happens in Atlanta.
It's going to be for today's episode. As always, Nick, I appreciate you joining me.
Absolutely. Looking forward to this great matchup.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.
I do have an ESPN Plus subscription, actually. Oh, I forgot to highlight the. Hold on right there.